complete thing, Genesis, Revelation. He even went even further. Instead of just translating from the Septuagint, he even went further and translated from the Hebrew, what he had at the time, into Latin. Okay, so that, just so you know, that is the standard we have for our modern English translations. We translate from that list, from the Hebrew to English, and then from the Greek to English, right? if I turned this thing on, wouldn't it? That probably went that whole live stream. Oh, well, make a note of that, Dakota, that live stream comes on at such and such minute. Okay. All right. Uh, these emphases of Augustine should not blind one to his significance for the Christian church. Right. The reformers found Augustine an invaluable ally in their belief that man bound by sin needs salvation by God's grace through faith alone. Between Paul and Luther, the church had no one of greater moral and spiritual stature than that of Augustine. Okay, so big dude, right? Augustine is a big dude when it comes to the history of the church. He will be referred to from now until the time that Christ comes back. All right, so questions about him? Got it all. Okay. Yeah. Oh, against pagans. Man, they took out my P word. We got to be sure we put that back in there. City of God against pagans. And of course, for him, the pagans are literal pagans, right? Yeah. I like it. we could probably get a full vote for that. All right. Book doesn't tell me. That's going to require a Google search. I know it says he gave up his concubine, so I'm assuming that he said, "Here you go, and I'll take care of you." I don't know. How does that? I don't. I don't know. Somebody want to Google what happened to his son? I'm sure he writes about it in his biography. Sounds like more Latin. Yep, there you go. That sounds about right. Remember, they started doing that a lot earlier back then because they didn't live as long too. So there's another thing too. By 17, you would have already been serving in the Roman legions. Right? All right. Good question that I don't have the answer to. Anybody else got any questions that I may or may not be able to answer? Nope. All right. Now let's put some dates and some things together for the Catholic Church. Okay. So let's talk about how the Catholic Church becomes the Catholic Church. Something that's going to start to show up is something called monasticism. All right. These are the monks. Right? Somebody help me, what are they called? Monasteries. There we go. Thank you. Monasteries forming and those things, and the monks, the people who would literally seclude themselves from the world. And initially, this started off as a quest for holiness, but it's going to make more sense than just a quest for holiness too, because the world is literally falling apart all around them, right? Like you think about what's happening with the fall of the Western Roman Empire. You're talking about currencies meaning nothing. You're talking about not safe to travel anymore. You're talking about your village could be raided any day. Like just total collapse of known order that had existed for hundreds of years. It's like the zombie apocalypse without the zombies, right? Or just somewhat intelligent zombies. How about that? Anyways, so the monasticism starts to give rise, and this is going to start to take place even a little bit before Augustine. Okay, so it actually monasticism begins over here in Egypt, right? It begins over there, where people decide that they're going to seclude themselves and focus just on God and holiness, right? Being set apart from the world. So it starts over there, and it actually starts on the banks of the Nile. It says here that it would have been much more difficult to carry on the monastic life in areas where the climate was more severe than in Egypt, where the monastic life had its beginnings. The warm, dry climate and the multitude of caves and the hills along the banks of the Nile were conducive to a separation of the individual from society. Small gardens, along with the resources of food provided by the nearby Nile, made securing food
by the individual fairly easily. Nearness, yeah, okay. All right, so let's talk about the very early stages of it. Monasticism went through four main stages during the period of its emergence in Western civilization. At first, the ascetic practices were carried on by many within the church. Many later withdrew from society to live as anchorites. There's a word I'd never heard before. Don't know that word? Anchorites? It's literally anchorites. Okay. Or hermits. There we go. We'll just say hermits. I like hermits better. The holiness of these hermits attracted others who would then take up residence in nearby caves and look to them for leadership in what was called a lora, all right? A cloister for common exercises might be built. And the final stage, organized communal life within the monastery, appeared. This process had its beginning in the East in the 4th century, so that's the 300s, and from there it spread to the church in the West. Anthony, who is regarded, Anthony, I guess we don't have a last name for Anthony, but Anthony, 251 to 356, is usually regarded as the founder of monasticism. At the age of 20, he sold all of his possessions, gave his money to the poor, and retired to a solitary cave in Egypt to lead a life of meditation. Let's see. Athanasius actually wrote his biography called The Life of Anthony. So if you want to read that, you can read that. There's some funny little things about these monks early on. I'll read them just because it's kind of funny. They kind of missed the mark a little bit here. Like, got the holiness part down, missed the whole, go reach the world and tell the world about Jesus. So this is kind of interesting. So it says here that not all of the hermit monks were as sane as Anthony and his followers. One, known as Simon the Stylite, we'll go with that, from 390 to 459, after having lived buried up to his neck in rock in the ground for several months, he decided to achieve holiness by becoming an ecclesiastical pole sitter. So I don't know if this is the thing that Ace Ventura is making fun of or what, but maybe. He spent over 30 years atop a 6-foot pillar near Antioch. So if you want something to do, go sit on a pole, claim you're doing it for Jesus, right? I guess so. Obviously, they would have had to bring him food and all that stuff. But others lived and grazed in the fields, grazed the grass, right, after a manner of the cattle. So there you go. You can live a nice, peaceful life like a cow. Another, you'll have fun with this, wandered naked in the vicinity of Mount Sinai for 50 years, because why not? These, however, were only the fanatic fringes of the movement, and that were to be found in the East, and the West was not near as fanatic about this, okay? See, it talks more about the communal, social type of monasticism that would appear in the West. You say, Matt, why do we care about the monks? What's so important about monks and monasteries? As it turns out, they're going to be pretty important. So, let's talk about it. In the West, all right, so the West, monasticism differed considerably from that in the East. The colder climate made communal organization much more essential in order that warm buildings and food might be provided. Monasticism was also much more practical in its expression. It rejected idleness and deplored purely aesthetic acts. Work as well as devotion was emphasized. Okay, so here's why it's so important. As the Western Roman Empire starts to collapse, these monasteries are going to start to pop up, right? And these monasteries it's essentially people who are dedicating themselves to Christ, but as the world around it falls apart, the world will learn to seek refuge at the monasteries. Okay, so they would know that, hey, if we're traveling and we need a safe place to stay, we could go stay at the monastery. Another thing that's going to happen as well is that they're going to know that, hey, if we go to the monastery and we're sick, there's people there who are going to try to take care of us, right? Generally, people who are generally just trying to show the love of Christ. And, by the way, since you have all these men coming together and working together, they're all celibate, none of them have kids, and they're all working to feed each other, right? It's literally communism within a monastery, that they would have food, right? So as the Western Roman Empire collapses and goes into the Dark Ages, the one place of refuge is going to become the monasteries, right? And if you know anything about the Viking history, they learned real quick to go to the monasteries to find the best loot, right? If we go destroy the monasteries, kill all the monks, we can get all the stuff that's in there, right? That's why it's so interesting with the Vikings. They weren't conquered militarily; they were conquered religiously. They took the monks as prisoners and slaves and all this stuff, and toted them back to Scandinavia. And those monks were like, "Well, since we're here, might as well start preaching the gospel." And so they started doing that, right? All right. Athanasius is traditionally credited with the introduction of the monastery, or with monasticism into the West, during one of his periodic exiles from Alexandria. Pilgrims to Palestine came in contact with it there and in Syria, and were attracted to it. And so Martin of Tours, Jerome, Augustine, Ambrose wrote in favor of it, and helped popularize it within the Roman Empire. And Jerome's writings on Ascensionism ranked next to the Bible, and Benedict's rule in the medieval monks' library. So another thing that these monks were going to be dedicated to, and this is very important for us, right? This is probably their biggest contribution as far as we're concerned, and that is their dedication to transcribing the scriptures. This is very important. So look, they didn't have a printing press. They didn't have a copy machine or typewriter, any of that stuff. If the scripture was to be reproduced, it had to be handwritten. That's going to take a long time. Yeah? That's going to take years to do that. Okay? And also, when you apply the strictness that they used for their error, how many of y'all remember y'all had to handwrite papers? Remember that? You ever had to do that, Josh? You ever write a paper by hand? Okay, good. I'll ask the kids that on Wednesday too. We'll see how many have done that. I doubt very many at all. You know what happens when you're writing by hand? You mess up. Scratch it out. Keep on going. You know what they didn't have as monks? Whiteout or erasers. So you know what happens if you mess up? Start over. That's exactly right. So, do what? Yes, it would. One page at a time, guys. Let's do it one page at a time, not a whole book or codex or whatever, or scroll. But yeah, so it turns out that type of lifestyle may have been exactly what was needed in order for the scripture to be replicated over and over and over again, due to the lack of technology at the time, right? We really take it for granted so much that we have Bibles everywhere, right? For them, they did not. If you had a Bible, it was a handwritten copy of the book, right? Handwritten copy of the whole book from Genesis to Revelation. So, yes. Let's talk about this guy named Benedict of Nursia real quick, all right? From 480 to 543. He was shocked by the vice of Rome. He retired to live as a hermit in a cave in the mountains of eastern Rome at about 500 A.D. And about 529, he founded the monastery of Monte Cassino. Hey, does that sound familiar? Should. It survived until World War II, that monastery did. So that would have been 1,400 years that building was standing before it got bombed, all right? Anyways, so in 529, he founded the monastery of Monte Cassino, which survived until World War II when it was destroyed by a bombardment. Soon, several monasteries were under his control, following his plan of organization and work and worship. That is his rule. Each monastery was considered a self-sufficient, self-supporting unit or garrison of Christian soldiers for Christ. Not military, not yet. We'll get there. Let's see. The day was divided into periods in which reading, worship, work, all had important roles, and they would be fulfilled during their schedule. The regulations that Benedict drew up provided little meat for the monks, but allowed for plenty of fish, oil, butter, bread, and vegetables, and fruit in their diet. This rule, which emphasized poverty, chastity, and obedience, was one of the most important in the Middle Ages. By the 7th century, it was carried to England, Germany, and France, and became almost universal during the time of Charlemagne. It was the standard rule in the West by the year 1000 AD. Okay, so his big contribution was the organization of the monasteries into, hey, this is what we do, right? Here's our order for the day. This is what we're going to do. We're going to go work in the garden for 2 hours, and we're going to go catch fish, and then we're going to worship, and then we're going to go do this and that and the other. And that persisted for hundreds of years, right? Hundreds of years. Longer than the United States has existed, right? Big deal. Okay, of course, the monasteries are going to play huge roles by the time the medieval time period rolls around, right? They're going to play a huge role during the Dark Ages in the sense that they're the only place where the Scripture is being replicated and preserved. They also play as a huge refuge at a time when it's a very dangerous time to be alive, which is during the Dark Ages. Okay. Local monasteries often served as the medieval equivalent of modern experimental farms, right? In demonstrating better methods of agriculture, the monks cleared the forests, they drained the marshes, they made roads, they improved seeds and breeds of livestock. Nearby farmers often emulated the better techniques that they saw the monks using. Monasteries helped to keep scholarship alive during the Dark Ages between 500 and 1000 AD, when urban life was disturbed by the barbarians that took over Rome and took over the empire. Monastery schools provided education on the lower levels for those nearby who desired to learn. So this is another major contribution, okay? The monasteries were the place that you went to get educated. They didn't have a public school. So if you wanted to learn to read and write, you went to the monastery where the monks were, and they would teach you. Okay? This was how you learned. So basically all education during this time period, and even well into the medieval time period, came about via the monks and the monasteries and the church, right? This would be considered an arm of the church. So yeah, the education of Europe for hundreds of years is because of this, right? No public schools, no universities or things like that are really set up yet. And so that's kind of what's taking place. I guess they had universities, but for the basic levels. By the way, just so you know, that was a continued process in America. Like by the time the United States is founded, schools still served as the primary source of education for when was it, 1900s? When the public schools were founded, like early 1900s? Up until then, the church was in charge of education. So let that sit for a moment into just how new of an idea the whole public school system thing is, and how much the power of the church has waned in the last 120 years. All right. Okay, so the monks busying themselves with copying the precious manuscripts, which were thus preserved for prosperity, right? So they were copied and preserved. Treated very valuable. One of the main reasons they were treated valuable, yes, it's the Word of God, but think about how much time a copy of from Genesis to Revelation represented. That's hundreds and hundreds of hours of someone sitting at a lectern copying. So of course, it would be greatly, greatly valued. Okay. Let's see. In the middle of the 6th century, Cassiodorus, we'll go with that, 478, 573, a high government official under the Ostrogoths. We talked about those guys. Those are your Spanish dudes, right? Come over here. Yeah, those guys. Anyways, high government official, he retired from the government service to devote himself to the task of collecting and translating and copying patristic and classical literature. He was aided in this task by the monks of a monastery that he founded. The Book of Kells, I don't know what that is, a lovely and illuminated manuscript of the Gospels in Latin, was done about the 7th century by Irish monks, is an example of the beauty of the monks' work. Monks such as Beatty and Einhard and Matthew Paris wrote the historical records, which are primary sources of information concerning history of the period. So the only way we even know any history at all about the Dark Ages is because of the monks, right? They're your scribes. Monasteries provided a refuge for those who were outcasts of society, who were in need of help, and those who were in need of hospitalization would find themselves in the love and care of the monasteries. The weary traveler could be sure of food and bed and the hospitality of a monastery. Those who were tired of worldliness of their day could find in the monastery a refuge from the cares of life. Some of the best leaders of the medieval church, such as Gregory VII, would come from monasteries. Okay, so why do we care so much about them? Because they played a huge role during this time period. Right? Obviously, seclusion is not something that Christ has completely called us to. Yes, he's called us to holiness, but he has not called us to go live in a cave in the middle of the desert and hope that people come to us. Right? All right, questions about the monks? Go for it. Monks, not monkeys, monks. Know why? Cartoon? I don't have a cartoon on 146. Oh, yeah, I do. Okay. Did I read it? Oh, yeah, the guy who went out. Yeah, okay, I'll read that one. Yeah, that was funny. So one monk's penance, he was so upset because he killed a mosquito. He was penitent for having killed the mosquito that he lived 6 months in a swamp, allowing them to sting him nonstop. And he still didn't get West Nile virus. How about that? Another one, this one's fun. And of course, this would lead to, yeah, we'll get there. All right, so monks considered women the source of temptation and sin. And to dispel this temptation, this monk is burning away the remaining finger and thumb on his right hand. All that remains of his left hand is a stump, right? So I guess they took the, your body part causes you sin, cut it off thing. They kind of took it literal and did that. So I don't know why he cut off his hand instead of gouged out his eyes, but whatever. To each their own. The mosquito guy? Yeah. Yeah, the book shows two little drawings up here in the top that's found in caves of these monks doing this stuff. So there you go. All right. Of course, during this time, the monasteries, who is the ultimate person that they answer to? The bishop in Rome, okay, which we're almost there. During this era, those special sacerdotal hierarchy under the dominant Roman bishop, the tendencies to increase the number of sacraments and to make them main avenues of grace, and the movement of elaborate liturgy. Did I jump somewhere? I did. I'm sorry. Yes, I did. Back to monasticism. Sorry, give me a minute. Delete all that. Monasticism aided in the rapid development of a hierarchical, centralized, organization in the church because the monks were bound in obedience to superiors who in turn owed their allegiance to the bishop in Rome, who is now being called the Pope, right? And we can deplore that these tendencies, while at the same time we admire the fine contributions that the monks made during the Dark Ages and medieval life. All right, so let's talk about the bishop in Rome. Let's put some dates to this, right? The bishop in the early church was considered one of many bishops. Sorry, the bishop in Rome. Yeah, there we go. Let me start at the top. Between 313 and 590, the old Catholic Church, in which each bishop had been equal, became the Roman Catholic Church, in which the bishop of Rome won primacy over the other bishops. The ritual of the church also became much more elaborate. The Roman Catholic Church, in its structure and canon law, reflects imperial Rome. This is the marriage of what's left of the Roman Empire and the church. Okay? We talked about how Constantine started that in a very big way. I think it would be 3 of his successors before it's finalized, right? There was one who tried to revert it back and they killed him. All right, so the bishop, the Roman bishop, in the early church was considered one of many bishops who were equal to one another in rank, power, and function. Between 313 and 450, the Roman bishop came to be acknowledged as the first among equals. But beginning with Leo I and his ascension, that would become Leo the Great, right? He's the guy who met with Attila, and Attila spared the city. Ascension to the episcopal throne in 450, the Roman bishop began to claim his supremacy over the other bishops. Need for efficiency and coordination led naturally to the centralization of power. The bishop was also considered the guarantor of Orthodox doctrine. In addition, some of the Roman bishops of this period were strong men who missed no opportunity to increase their power. Okay, so during this time period, who is having the final say in all these controversies and heresies? Now, instead of it being councils, now it is the Roman bishop has the final say. So the historical events during this era conspired to enhance the reputation of the Bishop of Rome. Rome had been the traditional center of authority of the Roman world for half a millennium and was the largest city in the West. After Constantine moved the capital of the empire to Constantinople in 330, the center of political gravity shifted from Rome to Constantinople. This left the Roman bishop as the single strongest individual in Rome, the city, right? For great periods of time. And the people of that area came to look to him for temporal as well as spiritual leadership whenever a crisis faced them. He was a tower of strength during the sacking of Rome in 410 with Alaric. We talked about that. And the Visigoths, right? So the Visigoths are the ones that destroy Rome. Ostrogoths are the ones that settle in Spain. His diplomacy had at least been able to save the city from the torch. The emperor, Constantinople, was remote from Rome and its problems, but the bishop was near at hand to exercise effective authority in meeting political as well as spiritual crises. When the imperial throne in the West fell into the hands of the barbarians after 476, and other Italian cities became the seat of temporal power, the Pope of Italy came to look to the Roman bishop for political as well as spiritual leadership. Paul and Peter, influential apostles, were linked with Rome in their deaths. Okay, so when Constantine moved the capital to Constantinople, right? So now the center of the Roman Empire is now over here. That only leaves one person who's really in power in Rome, the city, and that is the Bishop of Rome. He demonstrated that power with Attila. He demonstrates it again with Alaric, and this is more than just spiritual putting down heresies. This is telling armies, hey, spare the city, and we will, and they do, right? So naturally, the people really, really lift him up a lot, okay? A whole lot. The Petrine theory, based on scriptures, so this is the theory of, you are the rock on which the church is built. We've been over that over and over again. Was generally accepted by 590. So by 590 AD, they're claiming that the papal, the Pope authority has been passed down from Peter all the way to now, and it's accepted across basically the whole of Christendom. According to this theory, Peter had been given ecclesiastical primogeniture. How do you say that word? You following along with me here? Okay. I don't know what that means, but we'll go with it. Over his fellow apostles. In other words, he'd been given primacy over his fellow apostles, and superior position had been passed on from his successors to the bishops of Rome by apostolic succession. There you go. There's your word. Apostolic succession. As early as about 250, Stephen I had appealed to these scriptures. So as early as 250, you start to see this take place. Great theologians such as Cyprian, I'm probably saying his name wrong. You know I'm talking about? Cyprian? Is it Cyprian? Cyprian? Yeah. Okay. Him, Tertullian, and Augustine were outstanding men of the Western Church under the leadership of the Bishop of Rome. The domains of the Roman bishop had never suffered from the hierarchical disputes, such as those that divided the East. For example, those of Arius. So, in other words, a lot of the heresies took place in the East, and in the West, they were put down a lot quicker, didn't have the damaging effects. Okay. Of the 5 great patriarchs of the church, so the 5 major hubs of Christianity early on, there's Jerusalem, there's Antioch, Alexandria, Constantinople, and Rome. Okay? Jerusalem, we already talked about that. It kind of falls whenever Jerusalem is completely destroyed and the Jews are dispersed. The church is no longer has a presence in Jerusalem because Jerusalem doesn't exist for a period of time. Antioch would fall by the wayside pretty quickly. Alexandria is going to have major problems. We're going to get there at the very end of the session. But by 590, Alexandria's got some big problems going on. Constantinople and Rome, right? So Jerusalem, which is right here. Jerusalem is over here. Antioch is over here. And Alexandria is over here. So these 3 would fade in significance pretty quickly. That leaves over here in Constantinople and Rome as the 2 major ones. The one in Constantinople is going to become more controlled by the state than by controlling itself. We'll talk about that some more when we get there too, which leaves Rome, right? The bishop, let's see, Alexandria now, yep, okay, we already did that. The Council of Constantinople in 381 recognized the primacy of the Roman See. There's our favorite word again. The Patriarch of Constantinople was given the primacy of honor next after the Bishop of Rome. So you have those 2 are considered the heads of the church. According to the 3rd canon of the Council of Constantinople, right? So they have this as early as 381. This was a practical recognition of the primacy of the Roman bishop by a group of leading clerics of the church. Emperor Valentinian III, in an edict in 445, recognized the supremacy of the bishop in Rome in spiritual affairs. So by 445, the bishop in Rome has the final say in all things to do with spiritual matters. Okay, says the emperor. 445. That's when the official, what's left of Rome, comes out, the edict dedicating that. Okay? Again, this has been brewing since 250, right? With the Stephen the First claiming, well, he's the descendant of Peter and blah, 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 all that stuff. So it's a gradual thing that grows. It's not a, there it is. If you wanted to put a, boom, there it is, and there's no refuting it, it would be 445. At least in regards to spiritual affairs. What the bishop would enact was to be law for all. Thus, the ecclesiastical and temporal authorities in the 4th and 5th centuries recognized the claims of the Bishop of Rome to the primacy of the church. Okay? Another thing, these monasteries, guess who they would become to answer to? They would become to answer to the Bishop of Rome, who's going to eventually be called the Pope. Since these monks are super critical and legalistic on issues, like I killed a mosquito, so I need to go get bit by mosquitoes for 6 months. Obviously, any type of rebellion would have been a big taboo, right? Major taboo for a monk. Like rebellion is sin. We don't do that. We stay away from that. Keep our head down and keep copying Scripture, right? So, yeah, they really had no big issue with answering to the Pope in Rome at this point. Okay, above all, the Roman Church was blessed with many bishops during this era. Then these men lost no chance to strengthen their power. That's a weird way of putting it, book. Damasius I, right? Damasus, we'll go with that, was apparently the first bishop of Rome to describe his see as the apostolic see. And so that's in 366 to 384, where he's describing himself as the apostolic see. Leo I, who occupied the episcopal throne in Rome between 440 and 461, and was the ablest occupant of the chair until Gregory I took that position in 590. So Leo is going to be, that's the Leo who talks Attila away. Gregory the First takes the position in 590, and his abilities won for him the name Great. He made much use of the title of Papas, from which our word Pope is derived. In 452, he was able to persuade Attila. Sorry, it was Gregory who did that, not Leo, I think. Yeah. 452, he is able to persuade Attila the Hun to let the city of Rome alone. Again, in 455, when Gasseric and his Vandal followers from North Africa came to sack Rome, it's Leo. All right, help me out. Leo did this, not Gregory. Okay, so we're at Leo, not Gregory. Leo talked Attila away. He's also going to talk the Vandals into a limited sack of the city, right, instead of a complete destruction. Anyways, Vandal followers from North Africa came to sack Rome. Leo persuaded them to save the city from fire and pillage. He had to agree, however, that the city would be given over to a 2-week period of sacking by the Vandals. Gasseric, the leader of the Vandals, kept his word, and the Romans looked up to Leo as the one who had saved their city from complete destruction. His position was further strengthened when Valentinian III recognized his spiritual supremacy in the west by the Edict of 445. Leo insisted that appeals from the church and courts of bishops should be brought into his court, that his decision would be final. He defined orthodoxy in his work, The Tome, and wrote against heresy of the Manetians and the Donationists. All right, even if we do not consider Leo the first pope, it is fair to say that he made the claims and exercised the power over many later incumbents of the Roman bishops. Galasius I, the first, I guess, Galasius the first, Pope from 492 to 496, wrote in 494 that God gave both sacred and royal power to the Pope and the King, because the Pope had to account to God for the King at the judgment. Yes, the sacred power of the Pope was more important than the royal power. Hence, rulers should submit to the Pope. Perhaps such power would be useful in the early periods in dealing with the barbarians, but later it led to corruption within the Roman Church itself. Right? So now, by the time Gaius shows up in 492 and 496, he's already putting the idea out there that the king should submit to the Pope, the bishop in Rome. Okay, so we good on all these dates. Long story short, 390, 450, very early on, 1,500 years ago, Pope is in power. We good? I think we're going to have to stop there and we'll pick up on the rest because we're already over time. So, yeah. We got the monks. Yeah. All this stuff is so far back that it's really, honestly, it's kind of boring for us because it's so far back. But it is important to understand that these people had to go before us in order for us to get where we are today, both the bad and the good, right? Their good contributions and their bad contributions. Any questions or comments about any of this? We'll talk about the We'll talk about the sacraments and the things that the church begins providing next session. But long story short, the church is going to be putting salvation, instead of it being salvation by grace, it's going to become salvation by sacraments, which can only be administered by the church. So salvation is out of the hands of Jesus and into the hands of the church, and the head of that church is the Pope. So the Pope is in charge of who's saved and who's not saved. That's a very oversimplification of it, but that's what it is, right? All right. Did y'all get all that? We good? Everybody get caught up on their naps? Go get bit by some mosquitoes. Do it for Jesus. That's okay. You don't have to. God didn't want us to kill them, then they wouldn't bite us. Yeah, there you go. All right, we good? All right. Ed, why don't you dismiss us in prayer?